The moment her article went live, a billionaire empire started collapsing. $3.2 billion vanished in under 10 minutes. Stocks crashed, headlines exploded. And at the center of it all, one name, Kim Lee. But this wasn't just a story. It was a calculated attack. Because while the world watched him fall, the woman who destroyed him was already inside his company wearing an intern badge and hiding a secret that could ruin them both. Brooke's fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, the rhythmic clicks the only sound in the dead silence of the IT basement. On her screen, a cascade of crimson code signaled the breach. She wasn't just searching, she was carving a signature into the heart of Lee Industries. She reached up, her thumb brushing the cold, tarnished silver of the locket hanging from her neck. A cold reminder of a debt unpaid. It was a heavy, tarnished heart that refused to open, much like the truth behind the Project Clean Water disaster that had buried her father's reputation along with her hometown. To the world, her father was the negligent engineer who poisoned 1,000 lives. To Brooke, he was the man who died holding a secret he couldn't protect. She hadn't spent a decade mastering complex systems and investigative journalism for a paycheck. She had become a weapon, and today, she was aimed directly at the heart of Lee Industries. Brooke didn't believe in luck, she believed in architecture. She didn't just apply for an internship, she engineered a disturbance in the company's core server that acted like a digital heartbeat, subtle and impossible for a mind like Kim Lee's to ignore. It wasn't a crash, it was a signature. A breadcrumb left for the only man capable of following it. She knew the moment he saw the anomaly, he wouldn't call a team. He would want to see the person who dared to touch his code. Inside the glass and titanium heights of the penthouse office, the atmosphere was thin and freezing. Kim Lee sat behind a desk of polished obsidian, the blue light of 3 monitors reflecting in his dark, analytical eyes. He didn't look up when she entered. He simply stared at the scrolling lines of the command prompt. "This wasn't a glitch," he said, his voice a low, dangerous vibration that seemed to hum through the floorboards. "This was an invitation. Someone wanted my attention." "Why, Brooke Miller?" She stood her ground, her expression a mask of bored, intern-level competence. She didn't flinch under his heavy, silent gaze, a gaze that felt like it was peeling back her skin to look at the wiring beneath. When she stepped forward to fix the disturbance, her fingers moved across the mechanical keyboard with a grace that betrayed her. She used a non-standard syntax, a rare language that only top-tier architects understood. She felt him shift, his shadow falling over her workstation. He was watching her timing, noting that her heart rate hadn't climbed a single beat. Kim didn't believe in coincidences. He saw the way she handled the system. Too perfect, too calm, too intentional. Most interns trembled in this office. She treated it like a playground. He knew she was a presence that didn't belong in his database. But instead of calling security, he leaned down, his breath against her ear as he reached past her to tap a single key. The proximity was a physical weight, a sudden surge of heat in the frozen room. "Impressive," he murmured, though his eyes remained icy. "You're overqualified for filing papers. I'm granting you level 5 access. You'll report directly to me." Brooke's pulse finally thudded. Level 5 was the keys to the kingdom. It was every encrypted file, every hidden ledger, every hidden project his father had ever signed. She thought she had won. She didn't see the way Kim's jaw tightened as he watched her leave. He hadn't given her the badge because he liked her work. He had given it to her because a ghost is easier to catch when you give it a room to haunt. It wasn't a promotion. It was a cage. That night, Brooke sat in her darkened apartment, the glow of her laptop the only light, as she logged into an encrypted underground forum. This was her sanctuary. This was where she spoke to Socrates, an anonymous source she believed was a high-level whistleblower within the company. For months, Socrates had been her only tether to the truth. He pointed out the flaws in Kim's public image and fed her the crumbs of corporate greed she needed for her exposé. "The target opened the door," Brooke typed, her fingers trembling slightly. "He gave me the access I needed. I'm inside." Miles away, in a dimly lit study, a member of the Lee Industries board watched the words appear on his screen. He smiled, the cold light of the monitor deepening the lines of greed on his face. He didn't care about Brooke's revenge or her father's legacy. He only cared about the information she was about to steal. Information he could use to destroy Kim Lee and take the throne for himself. "Good," Socrates typed back, his digital voice smooth and encouraging. "But remember, Brooke, a man like Kim Lee doesn't give anything away for free. If the door is open, it's because he's waiting on the other side with a knife. Stay focused. The town is waiting for justice." Brooke stared at the screen, a strange sense of comfort washing over her. She felt like Socrates was the only person in the world who truly understood her mission. She reached up and gripped the silver locket, the metal biting into her palm. She was so close to the truth. She didn't know that she was being used as a scalpel by the board, or that Kim Lee was already monitoring her every keystroke from the shadows. The game had moved from the servers to the soul, and neither of them was prepared for the crash. The air in the Level 5 lab didn't just feel cold anymore. It felt charged, like the moments before a lightning strike. For weeks, Brooke and Kim had occupied the same few square feet of glass and silicon, their relationship a series of calculated collisions. There was no softness here. Every time Brooke questioned a line of code or a corporate decision, Kim met her with a precision that was as breathtaking as it was infuriating. He didn't just win arguments, he dismantled them. "Efficiency isn't a lack of ethics, Brooke," Kim said one evening, his voice flat but echoing in the empty lab. He didn't look up from his screen, but his focus was entirely on her. "It's the only way to ensure the system survives long enough to do any good. Your idealism is a luxury the real world can't afford." Brooke didn't flinch. She leaned against the edge of the obsidian desk, her locket catching the blue light. "If the system only survives by crushing the people it's supposed to serve, then maybe it doesn't deserve to exist. Or maybe you just like the view from the top too much to care about the bodies in the foundation." The silence that followed was heavy, a physical weight between them. Kim finally looked at her, his gaze dropping to her mouth for a fraction of a second before locking onto her eyes. It wasn't comfort. It was a recognition of a shared intensity. He was watching her more closely than she realized, not just her work, but the way she bit her lip when she was frustrated, and the way she refused to back down even when he cornered her logically. She, in turn, was seeing things that didn't fit the villain narrative. She saw the way he stayed until 4 a.m. fixing errors his staff had missed. She saw the quiet, exhausted loneliness in the way he stood by the window, staring out at a city he owned, but didn't seem to belong to. But while the fire between them began to shift from hatred to a dangerous, unspoken respect, the shadows in the boardroom were moving. Mr. Hahn and Ms. Vance hadn't missed the way the new intern was digging through the legacy servers. They weren't just watching her, they were dissecting her. They found the connection they needed. The name of the engineer who had taken the fall for Project Clean Water. Her father. They didn't send her a threat. They sent her a lure. A series of confidential files appeared in a hidden directory Socrates had pointed her toward. They were masterpieces of deception, forged documents laced with real metadata fragments, emotional triggers designed to bypass her logic and strike her heart. The documents were blueprints for a new filtration system that used the same toxic chemicals that had destroyed her town. And at the bottom of the digital page, a forged authorization signature from Kim Lee. History wasn't just repeating itself. Kim was the one pulling the trigger. The day before she planned to burn his world down, something shifted. During a high-level executive meeting, The board pushed for a project that would displace a low-income community for a new data center. Brooke stood in the corner listening, her heart cold, waiting for Kim to sign off on the greed. Instead, he shut it down. "We aren't in the business of clearing land at the cost of lives," Kim said, his voice cutting through the board's protests like a blade. "The project is dead. Find another way, or find another company." After the meeting, the hallway was empty when he stopped her. His guard was down just an inch. "You see things others miss, Brooke," he said quietly, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "It's your greatest strength. But don't let your passion turn into bias." For a heartbeat, Brooke wavered. The man standing in front of her didn't look like a monster. He looked like a protector. But then she thought of the forged files. She thought of her father's name on those blueprints. The doubt was a poison, swifter and more effective than anything in the water. She convinced herself the hero act in the boardroom was just another layer of his mask. She didn't just leak the story. She made it a massacre. Sitting in his own office, using the level 5 access he had trusted her with, Brooke bypassed every firewall he had built. She confirmed the metadata on the forged evidence, her eyes stinging as she hit the publish button on her global exposé. She didn't just write a story, she unleashed a digital tidal wave. The headline was a death sentence: Lee Industries, the Sun's Toxic Legacy. As the stock tickers began to bleed red and the sirens of the news cycle started to wail, Brooke stood up. She didn't feel the victory she had expected. She felt hollow. She had chosen the truth, or what she thought was the truth, over the man who had finally begun to look at her as an equal. She had waited her whole life to avenge her father, but as she looked at the empty chair where Kim had sat, she felt a slight sense of guilt she didn't expect to feel. The betrayal was complete, and as the empire started to crumble, the silence in the penthouse was finally, truly, deafening. Outside, the world was screaming. Red numbers bled across every news ticker in the city, and the Lee Industries logo was being dragged through the digital mud. Angry protesters gathered at the company's entrance. Brooke stood by the glass, watching the frenzy she had created, her heart hammering a rhythm of pure, cold regret. She had won. So why did it feel like she was drowning? The door hissed open. She expected security. She expected handcuffs. Instead, she found Kim. He looked different. His tie was gone, and he looked concerned and tired. He didn't look at the monitors displaying his ruin. He only looked at her. "The board is calling for my head," he said, his voice low and strangely hollow. "The banks are freezing our assets. My lawyers are telling me to vanish." He took a step toward her, his presence no longer intimidating, but desperately human. "I came here because you're the only thing in this building that isn't a calculation. Everyone else is a variable. You're the only truth I have left, the only one I strangely feel open and vulnerable with." The guilt hit her like a physical blow. He was looking at her with a raw, terrifying trust, completely unaware that the woman he was seeking shelter with was the one who had pulled the trigger. Brooke felt the air leave her lungs. She had to say something, anything, to push him away, before the lie consumed them both. "You should go to the meeting," she stammered, her voice trembling. "The one at the private airstrip. If you leave now, you can still get ahead of the board's vote." Kim froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. His eyes, which had been soft with vulnerability, suddenly turned into shards of ice. He didn't move, but the atmosphere in the room turned lethal. "The airstrip?" he whispered, the words sounding like a death sentence. "That meeting was never on the server. I wrote that location on a piece of paper in an offline room. There is only one way you could know that." He didn't wait for her to answer. He lunged for her workstation, his fingers moving with a violent speed. Brooke tried to block him, but he moved her aside with a firm, trembling hand. He tore through her hidden directories, bypassing the encryption she thought was foolproof. One by one, the truth came out of the system: her workstation, her hidden camera files, her forged press credentials, her access logs showing the exact moment she hit publish on the expose. "Brooke Miller," he said, the name sounding like ash in his mouth. He turned to her, his face contorted with a pain so sharp it felt like it could cut through the glass. Or should I say, Brooke the journalist? The spy? The woman who just burned 10 years of my life for a headline? "I did it for justice," Brooke screamed, the dam finally breaking. "I saw the files, Kim. I saw your signature on the new filtration project. You're doing exactly what your father did. You're poisoning people for profit, just like the man who killed my father and destroyed my hometown." "My father didn't kill anyone," Kim roared, his voice shaking the windows. He slammed his hand against the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "My father died trying to stop that project. He was murdered because he was going to blow the whistle on Hahn and Vance. I didn't build this company for power, Brooke. I built it to find the evidence they buried. I gave you level 5 access because I thought you were the only person smart enough to help me find the smoking gun." He grabbed a physical folder from his safe and threw it at her feet. Papers scattered across the floor, real blueprints, real memos, documents that showed his father's desperate attempt to save her town. "The files you found were fakes. Hahn and Vance fed them to you because they knew you were looking for a monster. They knew your bias would do their work for them. You didn't expose the truth, Brooke. You just buried the only man who was actually on your side. I have spent years trying to find indisputable evidence to tie them both to this project that destroyed so many lives, but they have been smart enough to cover their tracks well." The world tilted. Brooke looked down at the papers, her vision blurring. The metadata she had confirmed, the signatures she had trusted, they were all fake. She had been the board's perfect weapon. She had taken her revenge out on the only person who shared her pain. "Kim, Don't," he spat, the word dripping with a hatred that was far worse than his coldness. He hit the intercom. "Security, get her out of my sight, now." 2 guards burst into the room. They didn't care about her tears or the way she struggled. They grabbed her by the arms, dragging her away from the desk, away from the man who was now staring out the window at the ruins of his legacy. As they hauled her toward the elevator, Brooke fought back, her body lurching against their grip. There was a sharp snap. The silver locket, the one she had worn every day of her life, was torn from her neck in the struggle. It hit the floor with a heavy metallic thud, sliding across the polished stone until it stopped at Kim's feet. The elevator doors hissed shut, swallowing her cries. Kim stood alone in the wreckage of his empire. He looked down at the tarnished silver heart lying on the floor. He picked it up, feeling the cold weight of it in his palm. It was the only thing he had left of the woman who had destroyed him. For the first time in his life, the man who had an answer for everything looked completely, utterly lost. He didn't see a spy anymore. He saw a broken girl who had lost her way in the dark, and realized that in trying to catch a devil, they had both become one. The silence in Brooke's apartment felt like a tomb. For 3 days, she hadn't slept, her eyes fixed on the scrolling text of her old chats with Socrates. She was looking for a sign that she hadn't been the villain. Then, her heart stopped. She stopped at a message sent the very night Kim had shut down the board's expansion project. Socrates had written, "Power doesn't concede, Brooke. It only disguises itself as mercy to keep the weak silent." Those weren't just words. They were the exact words Ms. Vance had hissed to Mr. Hahn in the hallway after the meeting, a conversation Brooke had overheard while hiding in the server room. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Socrates wasn't her digital soulmate or a whistleblower. Socrates was the enemy. The woman who had smiled at her in the elevator and played the concerned mentor was the one who had been feeding her poison wrapped in silk. Brooke had been a weapon in Vance's hand, a scalpel used to cut Kim out of his own empire. Every emotional anchor she had built with Socrates was a calculated lie. Her judgment hadn't just been clouded, it had been surgically removed by a woman who knew exactly which wounds to salt. Brooke didn't just look at the files again, she stripped them down to their binary core. This time, her vision wasn't clouded by the ghost of her father's death. She looked at the metadata with the surgical precision Kim had taught her. And there, buried in the routing headers of the anonymous leaks, she found the digital fingerprint of Ms. Vance. The morning of the final board vote arrived. Inside the Lee Industries headquarters, the atmosphere was predatory. Ms. Vance sat at the head of the table, her expression one of practiced, tragic concern. Kim sat opposite her, silent and drained, watching his life's work about to be voted into the hands of the woman who had spent months grooming his intern to destroy him. The motion to remove Kim Lee as CEO is officially on the floor, Vance announced, her voice smooth as oil. Suddenly, the massive 80-inch displays in the boardroom flickered. The lights dimmed, and the high-resolution feed of the stock market was replaced by a familiar interface, a command prompt. A rhythmic digital heartbeat began to thrum through the room's hidden speakers. Brooke's face appeared on every screen in the building, and on the live stream being watched by millions. She wasn't wearing her intern badge. She was dressed in a sharp suit, her eyes fixed and unwavering. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She spoke with the cold, terrifying authority of a woman who had nothing left to lose. "My name is Brooke Miller. I am the journalist who broke the story on Kim Lee," she began, her voice echoing through the silent boardroom. "And I am here to expose the person who actually wrote it." In real time, she executed a forensic breakdown that played across the screens like a horror movie for the board members. She showed the source code of the forgeries and cross-referenced the Socrates chat logs with Vance's private IP address. Then, she played the killing blow. A recording she had scraped from Vance's private cloud of her laughing about how easy it was to manipulate a broken girl with a grudge. The room was paralyzed. Vance's face turned cold as the world watched her confession in high definition. Kim didn't look at the screens. He looked at Brooke's digital image, his jaw tight, realizing the depth of the trap they had both been in. Kim Lee was never part of any corruption, and neither was his father. It was all a plot led by Ms. Vance, who wanted nothing more than to be in charge of the Lee's Industries, Brooke said, her voice finally cracking just an inch. "He spent 10 years trying to fix a mistake he didn't make. I was the one who was blind. I was the one who let a monster lead me by the heart." She hit the final key, publishing her last article to every major news outlet simultaneously. I was wrong, the architect of the lie. She had cleared his name. She had saved his empire. But in doing so, she had stood in the center of the world's stage and admitted that her heart had been a backdoor for his enemies. As the screens faded to black and Vance was led out by a security team, Kim remained in his chair. The room was empty now, save for the hum of the servers. He reached into his pocket and felt the cold, silver locket he still carried. Brooke had given him back his company, but she had lost her faith in herself. She had chosen the truth, even though the truth proved she had been the one to hold the knife. The silence in the aftermath of the scandal wasn't the peace Brooke had expected. Brooke had moved back to her father's old workshop in her ruined hometown. She was sitting on the edge of the pier, watching the gray water, when the sound of a high-end engine cut through the stillness. She didn't turn around. She knew the cadence of his footsteps before he even reached the wood of the dock. Kim didn't look like a billionaire anymore. He had traded the tailored obsidian suits for a simple dark coat. He didn't come with flowers or an apology. "I didn't come here to tell you it's okay," Kim said, his voice rough and low, blending with the sound of the tide. "I didn't come here to tell you I forgive you. I'm not even sure I know what that word means anymore." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver locket. It had been repaired, the chain reinforced with a thin, unbreakable titanium link. But he didn't just hand it to her. He pulled out a small, handheld device, a frequency decoder he had spent the last week building from the schematics of her father's old engineering patterns. "You spent your life trying to break into this," Kim said, his eyes finally meeting hers. "And I spent mine trying to ignore why it was sealed. We were both looking for the same thing in the wrong places." He pressed the device against the locket's seal. A low, rhythmic hum vibrated through the air, followed by a sharp electronic click. For the first time in over a decade, the silver heart popped open. There was no photo inside. Tucked into a specialized vacuum-sealed compartment was a tiny, gold-plated microdata chip. The air between them seemed to vanish as they leaned over the small screen of Kim's tablet. The video that played was grainy, dated, and devastating. It was Brooke's father, recorded nights before the disaster. He wasn't alone. Kim's father was there too, sitting in a dimly lit office, both men looking terrified but resolute. "If anyone is watching this," Brooke's father said, his voice trembling, "it means we failed. Han and Vance have compromised the system. They're forcing the chemical dump tonight, and they've set us up to take the fall. Kim's father and I, we have the logs. We have the proof. We're locking it all in the heart. Brooke, if you find this, find the Lee boy. Don't fight him. He's the only one who can help you finish what we started." The video cut to black. The silence that followed was different now. It was the sound of a 10-year-old lie finally breathing its last. Both families hadn't been enemies. They had been partners in a war they weren't equipped to win. They had been destroyed by the same hand for years. "They used us," Brooke whispered, the tears finally breaking through her guard. "They turned us into enemies to keep themselves in power." "Then let's stop being enemies," Kim replied. Brooke didn't send the data to a newspaper this time. She didn't look for a headline. She executed one final total command. She released the raw data publicly, every log, every video, every forged document, to every server on the planet. It wasn't a calculated attack, it was total transparency. She exposed the manipulation, the falsified evidence, and the brutal truth of the past. As the digital world exploded with the truth, Brooke and Kim stayed on that pier. Kim stood beside her, his hand inches from hers. He stared out at the water, his jaw tight. "I don't know how to trust again," he said, the admission sounding like a confession. "I don't know how to look at a person and not see a hidden motive, but I know I don't want to keep losing you because of it." Brooke exhaled, a long, shaky breath that felt like the first time she had truly breathed in years. Her voice was softer, stripped of the journalist's edge and the hacker's armor. "Then don't decide it alone, Kim. We've spent so much time being brilliant and solitary. Maybe we should try being human together." The distance between them was only a few inches. The wall that had been built out of secrets and billionaire legacies was gone, leaving only two people standing in the wreckage. Kim turned to her, his gaze intense and emotionally grounded. "Let's try," he whispered. Brooke nodded, her hand finally sliding into his. "We learn together." Kim reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw before tangling in her hair. He pulled her close, and this time, there was no hesitation, no suspicion, no code to crack. He kissed her with a raw, desperate honesty that told her everything the words couldn't. The world outside was still screaming, but in the circle of his arms, the noise finally stopped. They weren't an intern and a CEO anymore. They weren't a spy and a target. They were just a man and a woman, starting over on a clean slate.